is not an experiment. Let me say it again. This is not an experiment. We had the time, and I'd be happy to go with some of you. We could visit dozens of open admission public urban high schools that graduate at least 90% of their children and send at least 90% on to college. We do know how to do this. What no one has ever done.
We've done 87%, my friend.
What no one has ever done.
Will not have any disruptions.
I'm sorry.
Is been able to move from individual schools that do this to real scale, to real numbers, as part of a traditional school district with a collective bargaining agreement. That's the goal of these schools. That's why I came here. And when we do that, I think DPS will be in a position to not only be providing its children with the opportunities they need, but will move to the forefront of American education systems, which is where I think we all agree DPS needs to be. So if any of the members have any questions, I'd love to respond, and I'll go through you, Mr. President.
Board Member Murray and then Member Raddick.
Yes, sir. Now, your program sounds pretty well, but we talking about a select few, and we have this board is concerned about all of our children getting upward mobility, and if you're taking the elite few and moving them toward a pre-college type program, how is that going to help the rest of the children?
What a good question. And if this were about taking the elite few, I would not be here. Cody and Osborne are open admission schools in difficult neighborhoods. They're the children we have been leaving behind. This is about not taking children in special test schools. We have those. They actually, if you look at Renaissance, Cass, Detroit School of the Arts, they do hit 99. They're achieving that. They graduate more than 90% of their kids. I believe we don't keep enrollment figures fully, but I think there's a good chance that 90% of their kids do enroll in post-secondary the following year. What the challenge is, what these schools are designed to do, are take the kids, a big chunk of whom went over to EAA, the Denbys, the Pershings, the Southeasterns, the Centrals, the Fords, the Mumfords. In this case, though, what we have here is we have a number still of open admissions high schools. 3 small schools at Osborne, 3 small schools at Cody, which are part of this. Western and East Village, which are part of the centrally supported schools that Karen focuses on. So this is about learning how in Detroit to give the kids that don't come with any special talents or skills necessarily, but are as bright as any kids, and put them on the path to graduation.
What about the community input into the governing boards of the self-managed or site-based schools? What about community input into those? The parents have been complaining bitterly that they don't know the people who are on the governing boards and that they're not allowed any input in the meetings.
The boards were constructed, the councils were constructed, they're not boards, you're a board. The councils were constructed in a way to make sure that there was strong community involvement. For example, let's take Cody.
Let's take DSA.
Well, let me run through all of them. I'll do DSA too. Cody, the chair is Charles Small, who is the president of Don Bosco, which is a major community organization in the Cody Rouge area. Also, there's a representative on the governing council from the Cody Rouge Council, and there's also a parent. So those are 3 of the votes. At Osborne, Quincy Jones, who represents the Osborne who is a member. There is also a parent. There, the president is Alice Thompson, who is the executive director of Black Family Services. So I believe those schools are well connected to their community.
Those sound like nonprofits. I'm talking about people who have children in the schools.
Well, that community, each of those has a parent member, a voting member who has a parent in that school. That was a requirement. And so every one of these things.
Who's required?
Then let's go to Ben Carson. And of course, it has a parent. Its chair, because of its focus on science and medicine, is Dr. Edie, who is the CEO of Sinai Grace Hospital, has the Associate Dean of the MSU Medical School, has a representative from Ford Health System, and again, has a parent of a student who's currently in the school. They all have parent, full voting members who have children in the school. DCP, Detroit Collegiate Press, similarly. DSA has a parent, a member who is on the council, whose name was recommended through a process of parent input organized by the LSCO. The LSCO came up with several names of people who parents said would represent them reasonably and effectively. And out of that group of 3 or 4, the existing council members recommended one to Mr. Roberts, and that was the person who was appointed.
Just for the audience, I would like to point out that according to the report that Mr. Ross has given us today, that this further demonstrates that since the state has taken over DPS schools in 1999, even if you look at this chart, since the state has taken over DPS enrollment has declined drastically, and the test scores have gone down drastically. So this is just an example. This is not directed to you. This is to the state, that this is what the state has created. And I always want to point that out and make everyone aware that DPS was well on its way to achieving our goals before the state took over, academically and financially. And you can see it right here. Largely, the decline in enrollment and the deficit that we have, I will always state at each meeting, whenever I have an opportunity, is a creation of the state and not DPS. I just want to make that clear.
Let me, if I can, I know you were not addressing it with me, and I'm not here to argue any facts or data with you. But I think it's important because to the degree that you're going to play a role in the future of this district, I think it would be a mistake to think that there was sort of a golden era to go back to. The dropout rate, the graduation rate in the 90s was deplorable.
They lied.
The numbers are
They
the same
lied.
numbers in the
Still
state.
lie.
The dropout rate has been poor here for a quarter century. And we're not going back to what we did is not going to get us where we have to go. So I'm not here to argue with you about what effect the state had, but I wouldn't want us to think that, gee, if we just made all this go away, you know, we're in Fat City and our kids are on the way.
And certainly we would not want to use the same methods today that we were using in the 50s. But I just want to make it clear that this problem has been created by the state. So how can the state get us out of something that they created? I'm not trying to argue, but I just always want to, that noted for the record.
Let me say this, the state did create these problems. We had surplus, it turned into deficit. The dropout rate was high, but it was, as you pointed out, a quarter of a century, because people in Detroit could leave high school and go in the factory and make a middle class income. In fact, many of those people in the factory made more than college and master's degree teachers. So that was the enticement to drop out. So our students historically were enticed to drop out to get the middle class dream. So that's number one. Number two, there was never a way to follow the students when they moved, when they went down south, when they left out, if they died, if they went to prison, all of those were considered part of the dropout. If they moved to the suburbs, in some cases we found, because I was in the legislature at that time, we found students that actually graduated, they moved from the east side and west side, and they were counted as a dropout at the east side school, or vice versa. Those type of things, so there was never a way to really monitor, so we never had any accurate numbers, because we kept trying to pull that in Lansing. So it was really, and because it's a large city, and people are in transit, there was never a way to say which students dropped out. And finally on that issue, we must say for the record that we used to graduate 3,000 and 4,000 students a year in adult ed. So they dropped out, but they dropped in, and they got their GED and went on to college, and some of them, I know a couple of judges who went that route, and et cetera. So we never had true, accurate data that reflected. And because many of our families are more challenged, so the family unit was the greatest predictor. And a lot of our families were challenged, and therefore students, but they found a way. In many cases, they found a way, and there was no documentation of following those examples. So those are the things that are neglected to say in those dropout rates. In terms of the test scores, they were going up. And relative to the state of Michigan, because that's what we have to compare. So if you compare the same socioeconomic group throughout the state, we're just concentrated here because of historic racism and discrimination. So you're going to use the discrimination against us, because if you go to the same white districts with the same socioeconomic value, you find that their dropout rates were even higher. So Detroit was targeted because we were cash rich. We had $1.5 billion bond. We had a $40 million rainy day fund. We had $93 million surplus. Verified by the state's agent and Dr. Adamati, who came and said and increased the surplus. So this mess that we're in is a direct result of the state's intervention.
That's right.